Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us today for AIA California's bonus session in our series 2021 Climate Action Webinars, which is a special member benefit opportunity for AIA California members. Again, I'm Rona Rothenberg, AIA California's first Vice President, President-elect, and I will be your moderator for today's segment. We in AIA California have developed an in-depth series focused on understanding and implementing AIA National Framework for Design Excellence. The series has offered 25 webinars so far this year, including a handful from partnered organizations such as cove.tool. As always, all webinar content and additional resources will be available on the AIA California website shortly after each session. Additionally, more information on the final 3 climate action webinars for the year will be shared in your follow-up email. As mentioned, AIA California and cove.tool have partnered once again to provide access to powerful tools that help our members and member firms overcome hurdles, streamline processes, and improve delivery of architectural services. Following today's webinar, make sure to take advantage of special offers cove.tool is providing specifically to AIA California members, including a 4-week complimentary cove.tool license and additional support. A few quick housekeeping reminders. You're all experienced with this platform, but before we get started, please use Q&A. We'll go through the questions at the end, and I know we get a few in chat. Remember, everything's being recorded, including the written portion, and tailor your input appropriately. During the presentation, please do turn off your video for better overall reception for the speaker and all of you. If you can like a question, to move it to the top of the queue, and you'll be able to see everything that's entered. Today's session qualifies for 1 AIA Health, Safety, Welfare Learning Unit for those watching live, and staff will report the units for you. The session is being, again, recorded and posted. And a PDF will be posted shortly thereafter. Today's session focuses on how the shifting energy codes are challenging architects with a wide variety of parameters to balance energy costs, daylight views, and embodied carbon. Hiring a consultant for every type of analysis is a burden, as we all know, for both owners, which is the role I've served, and for those who practice and others. Many architects are harnessing simulation to shape design and details of their projects. This is a standard of practice now. To be successful, teams must understand levers that impact the performance and setup processes for success. The session will dive into 2 case studies to generate a beautiful analysis graphics and see how to shape the narrative in a data-driven design process, and hopefully it benefits practice and the clients and the outcome of the projects. I'd like to introduce our presenter. Welcome and thank you for being here, Sandeep Ahuja. Sandeep is a founder of cove.tool, and she brings her expertise, she tells me, from Atlanta, Georgia, working on over 200 high-performance projects. Most recently, Sandeep presented at the UN Environment Assembly with 1,500 global delegates on the impact of buildings on climate change, showcased at the TEDx Atlanta, and won Forbes 30 Under 30. Brava for developing cove.tool, the automated sustainability consultant. With her desire to bring automation into AEC, she is pioneering integration of data-driven thinking into design and construction process with a developed and intelligent software. Sandeep, thank you, and please, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Rona, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you all for joining in today as we talk a little bit more about some of the key things and how they affect our design. Before we get started, I always find it helpful to spend just a couple minutes on why any of this matters to us. Of course, for some groups, this is more relevant. For other groups, it's understood, but it's always helpful to kind of have a level set as we start diving in. I feel there's a few key reasons why performance or climate change or any of this matters to us. Of course, the key reason that drives me is the fact that buildings do account for 40% of all carbon emissions. And for cities, for example, city of Atlanta, where I'm currently located, this number is closer to 60%. For the city of New York, this number is even higher. All to say that everyone that's on this webinar, all of us have an outsized ability to impact the total carbon emissions picture, which of course is pretty exciting. It's a big responsibility, and I always say that, well, with big power comes big responsibility. So we just need to handle it well, and we need to handle it together. The other reason why I think all of this affects everyone that's on this call is due to the survey that was conducted. Like, owners are starting to require sustainability and building performance on their projects more and more. In a survey conducted in December of 2020, so almost exactly a year ago from today, it was clear that a majority of the architects were working on RFPs and pursuits that required sustainability as part of their analysis, as part of their pursuits, as part of being able to set themselves apart, as part of being able to say that, yes, we have this core expertise, we are the right fit to work on this project. And because, of course, the global trends are all shifting in that general direction, the more prepared we are, the better set up we are to continue to win all of these competitive projects that are coming online. And lastly, the building energy regulations are becoming tighter every single year. What we see on this particular graphic is that for the same project, the same office project that could once use 100 EY, now EY is the measure of energy, right? So the lower the EY, the more energy efficient our project is, and the higher our EY, the less energy efficient our project is. For the same office project that was once allowed, just code minimum, local regulations, to use 100 EY, can today only do 20 EY. That's an 80% drop. Just in Atlanta last year, we went from the 2007 energy code to the 2013 energy code, which is a 40% drop. And I don't need to tell this group that's joining in from the AIA California how impactful local regulations can be, because if it was a 40% drop in Atlanta, which I think we can all agree is not cutting edge in terms of energy regulations, I'll let you all do a quick math on exactly what's going on in California as well. And we will take a quick look at that as well together. Typically, when regulations become tighter, our cost of project rises, right? Because we have to use better glass, better insulation, better mechanical systems, better lighting, sensors, maybe some PV panels, or in some cases, really all of the above. And as that happens, our projects tend to get more and more expensive because we have to use all of these more expensive things. What we're going to see today is a methodology on how we can use cost versus energy optimization to actually balance that, to actually bring that first cost and life cycle cost down, to be able to look through thousands of iterations, right? Thousands, with each with a different price point and a different performance value. If we're not looking at one glass, but 10 glass types, not one insulation assembly, but 10, maybe not one mechanical system type, but 5 or 10. And we're looking at all of the alternatives together, we can figure out the absolute lowest cost way to get to our performance targets. And as we go through the case study today, we'll mix in real-time expertise and skill sets so we can understand how we can do this. And we'll build it in with the case study to talk about how the team actually utilized all of the performance data to actually have differences and impact into their projects. I find this particular curves to be extremely helpful. The famous McLeany's modified just a little to be able to better talk about building performance and sustainability. But what this is actually telling us is that, as we can see in this blue curve right here, our ability to impact the cost, the first cost, right, and the performance of a project, it's extremely high up front because, well, nothing is quite fixed. And our ability drops as we keep moving forward. That makes sense, because as we keep making decisions, we keep finalizing that aspect of design. Well, we can't really go back and change it quite as easily, which is also reflected in this orange curve, right? Our cost of design changes, rises drastically. No surprise there. Imagine having to change your entire facade design at 80% construction drawing. That's a fairly expensive design revision, have to coordinate across all the different consultants, sub-consultants. Someone has to spend a lot of time making sure everything is reconfigured. That's an expensive design revision. Despite the fact that that is the least comfortable phase to make any design changes on, right? That construction drawing phase. That is where all of the traditional building performance modeling happens, because we're not doing it to drive decisions. We're not doing it to drive data-driven thinking. We're doing it to drive checkboxes. We're doing it to drive compliance. We're doing it to get a yay or nay. And my gosh, if it's nay, imagine the amount of rework and the amount of design revisions that happen often. Prior to creating cove.tool, I worked at a large company where I was running all of these analyses, and every time it required rework, it reduced the profitability of that project. Of course, the principals, the project managers, no one was happy about it. The workflow that we're going to look at today is how we can shift that process earlier on into the design, into pre-design, concept design, schematic design, early design development, so that by the time we make it to the construction documentation, we don't have to do those expensive revisions, of course, increasing our project profitability by up to 6%, which is a really big deal, especially when margins are razor thin in the competitive market that we currently are in. Now, prior to creating cove.tool, I ran a successful consulting practice. And in this sustainability consulting practice, me and my team worked on just about every type of project that you can imagine. Everything from a 5,000 square foot retail facility to millions of square foot office space, to labs, to healthcare, multifamily, hospitality, everything in the middle, all the way even to actually designing cities in different parts of the world, urban planning. And what we realized was that no matter the project type or the project size, we always had to do a few core pieces of analysis. We always had to do our climate studies, right, to collect climatic information of where we're designing at. We always had to do benchmarking so we could figure out how our project compares to the rest of the country or the world. Had to do some conceptual energy modeling so we could really balance our project to that benchmark. Do some parametric studies, which is just another way of saying running iterations. Do daylighting studies, glare studies, shadow studies, facade studies, and of course, pull everything together in a nice, easy to use report, because that's how the team makes a decision collaboratively, right? By utilizing outputs from a report. And even on the simplest project, now granted, this was a good 5 years ago, and we were billable at about $150 an hour. It took us 250 hours. I'll let you all do the math of any price escalations that may have happened. Let's put it at $200 an hour. I'll let you all do the math on just how expensive it was to bring us on a particular project. And that is the case for many projects, which is predominantly the reason why all of these analysis types don't happen on every project. It's not for lack of desire, it's lack of project budget. If we can't budget out $50,000 for a consultant because the owner is not ready to pay for it, well, how can we do a daylighting study? How can we do a carbon optimization? How can we do a cost optimization? All of this we'll be able to walk away in today's webinar with actionable information and how we can start incorporating it into our workflow. We'll be able to do it not externally with $50,000, but internally in just an hour, and be able to do that over a life of a project in about 10 hours. And that is exactly what we'll see in the case study and the workflow today. The workflow focuses significantly on automation, collaboration, data-driven design, and cost optimization. And we bring all of those factors together to create a really, really helpful user experience. Of course, it's used by thousands of people across the world because of the integrated workflow that it offers. Here's the case study that I want to share today. It's the third classroom and engineering building project designed for the University System of Maryland by Cooper Carey Architects and AEI engineers. And this is a 75,000 square foot classroom, lab, and dining project. This particular team started the project and set up some high performance goals. In terms of energy, they wanted to be 30% better than industry benchmarks. In terms of daylighting, they wanted to meet at least a 55% SDA, which is a spatial daylight autonomy. Basically means the amount of your floor plate that can operate without electrical lighting. They wanted to get to be under 10% of ASE, which is annual solar exposure. That's a glare metric, right? So just like SDA is the amount of daylight metric, ASE is the quality of daylight metric. So it's how much of your floor plate is in the threat zone for having too much glare. So after setting these high performance targets, and the daylight and glare targets also coordinate very, very closely to what's laid out in the LEED and WELL building standard, which this building was thinking about pursuing. They weren't convinced right away, but they were thinking about it, right? So it's helpful to get your goals aligned early on. They moved right in the concept design phase to better understand the climate. They wanted to understand exactly the location that they were designing in, what the dry bulb temperature was going to be, what the relative humidity looked like. For example, in this relative humidity graph, we can see in the findings that anything that's deep red, that means it's too humid. The blue zone, the light blue zone, that's great. So in the middle of the day, from 6 a.m. to noon, they were doing pretty good. It was right after noon where they had tons of relative humidity challenges. Same for relative temperature, right? The white, light blue, and light red shades, they're great. So pretty much all of this, it's fairly comfortable. It's really the middle years, the middle months where it gets too warm. You can see, you know, really June to September, perhaps this early, you know, kind of like time, the 6 a.m. time to noon time, where it gets to be a little bit uncomfortable. But outside of that, it's perfectly the middle of the day. It's perfectly comfortable. It's helpful to understand that, and it's helpful to have these guides along the way that explain exactly what each parameter means. Having worked at a large firm, building out their internal energy team, and having collaborated with tons of teams as a consultant, as an in-house consultant, both scenarios, I can tell you that there were so many projects where we slapped on the climate graph without truly understanding, without actually making the findings of what it meant. And that's exactly the kind of insights that we need on our fingertips, not just to display on the presentation board, not just to check a box that, yes, we have thought about sustainability. Yes, we're sustainable because we have some climate graphics, but to take it to the next level and be like, okay, what is this actually telling me? What does this psychrometric graph actually mean? What are all of these rectangles, and what are good findings from them? For example, what we were able to use with automation is get automatic findings. So we don't have to do the digging around, but the platform will automatically make it easy for us. So it tells me quite clearly that 6.3% of the time was comfortable without any passive strategy. So if I did nothing else, just design this building here, I'm comfortable for 6% of the year. Well, that's helpful insight. I wouldn't know that just by looking at the psychrometric chart unless I took the next step to have the findings. It's also telling me that by adding internal heat gain as a strategy, I could increase my comfort by 26%. That's a helpful finding too. If I know that thermal mass or evaporative cooling is not giving me too much help, right? It's under 2%, even occupant use of fans aren't helping either. I wouldn't spend time. And if I know that already in concept design, I'm not going to design outdoor porches with giant fans and use evaporative cooling because I already know that they're not effective strategy. The amount that they yield in comfort is extremely low. I'd be spending my effort on dehumidification. I'd be spending my effort on internal heat gain. And it's the ability to be able to see it all right away, automatically, that makes a really, really big difference. The team was then able to also look at benchmarking to understand exactly what other buildings of the similar program performed, right? So the national averages for this particular program was at 100 EY, which is the energy use intensity, the amount of energy your building uses per square foot over the course of a whole year. Now, at the time, the 2030 targets would have wanted them to be at 30 EY. The team wasn't committing quite that far, but they were wanting to be much better than national averages. So they set their EY targets at 60 to 70 EY, not by guess, not by just, thinking here's what others are doing, but by looking at data about their program and their building in their climate zone and having that intelligence in real time. They also utilized the same time to set up their benchmarks for daylighting and glare. And that was pretty much all they did in the concept design phase, is really set themselves up for success. Now, let's take a quick look to understand how we can start doing that together as well. So here we have it. So perfect. So as we can see right here, of course, if no one, if y'all don't already have access, like Hillary and Rona mentioned, everyone has free access for a full month to the platform. So you can really request your access and start diving in. Of course, the moment I do that, the platform wants to understand me a little bit better, to better be able to fit my needs. So I'll describe who I am on the project. And perhaps I've never done this before. And maybe I'm a one-person company or 1,000-person company. It doesn't matter. The platform fits itself to suit your needs versus the other way around. And at this point, I go ahead to my main homepage. The key thing to note is right across the top, you see your firm's AIA 2030 commitment. If you aren't a signatory to the AIA 2030 commitment, definitely consider it. It's a free program. It allows transparency and visibility to understand high-level trends. Your data is completely protected. Your data is not shared around. It's more anonymized to come up with trends so you can track your reporting and commitment. Now, I remember back in the day when it was part of my job to coordinate the AIA 2030 reporting across multiple different offices. It was time-consuming. I did it using Excel. I had to call every single project manager like, hey, Bill, I still haven't received your EUI and LPD numbers. Could I please have them now? It was just slow and it made no sense. Of course, the platform connects all of that in real time to the AIA 2030 reporting dashboard so that we don't have to do all of that manually, because it just doesn't make sense to be able to do that manually. And then instead of knowing once a year how the entire firm is doing, we know immediately, we know in real time. So for example, if I know in real time that this hotel project is performing not quite as well as all of our other projects, if I track that and know that in concept design, perhaps I can make a difference. But if I only learn about it once a year, and perhaps by then the project has already moved to design development or construction drawing, it's too late. It's too late to be able to make any effect or any difference, at least in a profitable way, because I can make changes to the design. It's just going to be expensive design revisions that no one wants to do. So being able to access that data in real time and connecting the entire team together on the web app is extremely, extremely helpful. And then of course, you can see exactly where all of your different projects are located. So this particular team, the Cooper Carey AI team, they were able to, of course, track their project and report it directly to the AIA 2030 DDX. But they were able to start a new project and select the building type that they were working on. Now, there's a few pre-built templates, but the team had the ability to create their own custom templates too. This particular team was extremely savvy in performance modeling, so they were able to create their own custom templates by simply looking at the Help Center and looking for a quick 5-minute guide on creating a custom template. Now, this Help Center is available to everyone, and it's basically an internal Google for building performance. So you can get your 5-minute guide on creating your custom templates. But again, if there's a team that's never done performance modeling before, the technical team is there to support them every step of the way. The technical team, available via chat and a response time of 5 minutes, is comprised of experienced architects, mechanical engineers, and performance modelers, are there to support every part of it, whether it's creating custom templates, whether it's verifying that a model is done accurately. Perhaps it's your first model and you need someone to peer review it. Or if there's some concerns with bringing in your geometry, perhaps you're bringing it in using Revit or SketchUp or Rhino or Grasshopper, whatever that may be. The technical team is there to support you every step of the way, because this is new education that we all have to learn in these changing times as the climate trends and requires us to gain this new skill set in a very, very fast amount of time. It's a very, very short amount of time. So selected the climate, selected the building type and typed in the project address. The moment it typed in the project address, it selected the local regulations for them. And this is true for all 50 states of the United States, in Canada, Australia, Japan, and the UK. So since we're at the AIA California session, let's take a quick look. I'm not entirely sure where the AIA California office is located, but I'm gonna type that in and see. Here it is at 11th Street, Sacramento. And the moment I do that, boom, we all see that it changed my energy code to the California Title 24 2019, which is currently prevalent in that region. Of course, you can manually upgrade or downgrade it, but it will automatically set it without you having to do anything to the local regulations. At this point, I moved to the next step of bringing in my geometry. Now, this particular team was using SketchUp to do their early massing studies, and then they were using Revit to bring in the later stage geometry, right? So SketchUp in concept and Revit in schematic. Now, that's always a challenge, bringing in geometry from all of these multiple different platforms. Only it helps that the cove.tool platform, if you go under the Resource Center and the App Store, has all the various plugins. Every single one of these software, you can bring in your geometry directly in real time. So that's exactly what this particular team did. They first brought in their geometry through SketchUp. They went simply to the SketchUp, downloaded the latest version of the plugin, looked at the tutorials, and then once their project moved on and it was now under Revit, they just overwrote that geometry and brought in their geometry using Revit. Of course, some teams choose to draw geometry directly in the free drawing tool app part of the software, which is kind of like basically a 3D modeling platform that helps you bring in geometry, modify it and send it out, or start from scratch in the drawing tool and send it out. Some teams will draw it directly within the app and send it out. So tons of flexibility there. And it's a completely free platform. So this particular team brought in their geometry, and then they moved on to the very next step of actually running analysis. Now, this analysis page, there's a lot of power here. Let's talk about it for a few minutes. Let's talk about what the key parameters are. Let's talk about what each different analysis type even means. And let's talk about how we can all start using it and how this team used it on the case study project. Now, just from a quick interface overview, we can see a whole range of analysis types covered here. The key thing to note, this reminds me of back in the early days, right? When I was doing this manually, I was doing it as a consultant. Each and every one of these tabs would easily take me 20 to 30 hours. It was just so difficult to have access to this data. And it took so much technical expertise for me to be able to do that I couldn't say that, hey, everyone should be able to do this analysis, because it just wasn't possible. It was so difficult. I had to do so much debugging. And my ultimate goal, I used to sit next, at this large firm, I used to sit next to this fantastic principal. He was extremely gifted designer, really, really good, and had done some really incredible projects. He was a tower designer, right? And I always used to, admire his designs, but my gosh, Jimmy, while he was an incredible designer, he could not use technology for the life of him. And luckily, I was all about data and I was all about technology. So I always used to run this analysis for him, like I did for everyone else on the 300-person Atlanta office. So I was the bottleneck. If it didn't go through me, it didn't happen at all. So my goal was that as we create cove.tool, Jimmy should be able to run every single analysis. And that is exactly what users have found. So looking at shadow analysis, something that would have been so complex, we can now simply move a few sliders, change the year, change the month, change the date, and really understand how the shadow moves across a site, really understand where is a good spot to place an outdoor patio, really understand where it's a good place to, consider some landscaping, really make sure we can understand what part of our facade is under shade versus what part is completely exposed. And pair that with some radiation studies, right? To understand exactly where the sun falls, where we have the hot spots versus where we don't have the hot spots. The purple zone, as we can see, is low radiation, and the yellow zones are high radiation, to really be able to see that and have that data immediately and be able to not guess, not wait, not think that, oh, the project doesn't have budget, but to be able to have it and to be able to tell a strong design story about it is extremely powerful. I mean, if I had to punch openings for this project, I'd want to punch those openings in parts where I can attract some heat gain, because we learned in the psychrometric chart that internal heat gain is a great strategy from a passive standpoint. So I'd want to put all of my glass where I can attract the sun, right? Because that's a great strategy for letting the heat in, letting the sun in. And pairing that with sun hours to make sure perhaps if we have some, landscaping with a landscape designer planned over here, to make sure that the plants that we're proposing are going to nourish, are going to be able to flourish and thrive in the 4 hours of sun that this part of the roof has access to. If we are perhaps thinking about some photovoltaic panels, back to the radiation analysis, we can see which part of the roof has access to more solar versus less solar. Be able to balance all these 3 parameters together, I feel is immensely helpful. And just even getting these 3 for every project is a big step forward for most projects from everything that I have seen. Now, another analysis that's extremely helpful, but now getting less and less so because, things are changing around the world for the better, is the COVID analysis, where you can see, what is the new occupancy, how many people you can actually support with 6-foot social distancing. But more importantly now, and consistently, is the view study. I remember being in healthcare meetings when I was a consultant, and the owner would want to know, does the patient room have a view to the outside? I also remember being in corporate office meetings, right, where we were designing an office tower, and the owner would want to know, do we have a view to the outside? Because they could sell or lease it for more. Also remember being in hospitality meetings where the owners wanted to know, does it have a view to the mountains, or does it have a good view, because then we can charge more for the rooms. That same intrinsic concept that views relate to higher value for the owner is true across pretty much every project, perhaps with the exception of something like a data center, where humans are not necessarily going to occupy the space. And despite the fact that views are such an important part of design and how designs can, create value, most projects don't study view. For one core reason, it's very difficult to do so. I ran it manually. I was the expert. I was running all the view analysis on projects. It took me a good 70 to 80 hours to be able to run a view analysis. Not every project can afford that. Not every project has owners that are ambitious enough to want to explore that. Doesn't mean they don't want good views. But if it's available right here so that I can see in real time, okay, deeper the blue, the better the view. And I can see that on a floor by floor level, that gray means horrible view. I'd want to put my restrooms in the gray zone. I'd want to put my key suites, my key areas of the design in the deep blue zone, because I want them to have good views. If perhaps views to the sky and context is more important, I'll look at that. If perhaps just having a view is more important, I'll look at that. If we're looking holistically at a view, well, that's exactly what I'll look at. But it's such an important analysis type, and I think is often not looked at enough or not studied enough, predominantly just because of how difficult it used to be. But now everyone can do it, so we might as well. The same goes back for the daylighting analysis. Here we're looking at spatial daylight autonomy. Now, of course, we're in the plan view, right, of this 3D project. But let's go top view. I like the top view. And let's have the north facing up. Okay, there we go. Now, the brighter the orange, that means the higher the amount of daylight. Blue means low daylight. And we can see that on a floor by floor level to really see how that varies. And also balance that with ASC, the glare, right? To really see where we have no glare, which is the green zones, where we have some glare, which is the yellow zones, and where we have lots of glare, which is these deep red zones, and really be able to understand where we have key challenges. Because if the project is on a tight budget, I don't want to waste any money adding shading devices where I don't need them, right? We see the north, that's a fairly obvious one. Even in this case, the west, we're fine. This context building is casting more than enough shade on my project that I don't need to waste any project dollars putting shading devices here. Where I will put shading devices is here, here, and here. If I didn't have data, I don't know how I would arrive at that conclusion or how I would arrive at the correct conclusion. Because I mean, I'm an expert in sustainability consulting. This is what I have done for years, all day, every day, for hundreds of projects. And I couldn't even answer that with just a rule of thumb because there's so many factors at play. The only way to know that for sure in reality, the project team did when they were working on their project. So they moved right into the schematic design phase, right? In this phase, it was all about running iterations. It was all about studying options. As we can see in the plan view, I mean, they had a whole range of different options, and we're only looking at what 16 of, gosh, way more options than 16. And each is kind of a differently laid out programmatically. Each connects to the master plan slightly differently. Each one of these options is different in terms of the program, the master plan, how it's laid out, visuals, aesthetics, to really say, this is what works, this option does not work, and to really be able to being able to layer it with energy, to be able to layer it with daylighting, and tease it down to the top 3 options at the end of schematic design phase. Now this team had these 3 options, right? Option 1, 2, and 3. What this graph is telling me, right? We see this blue bar graph. However, it's also telling me that option 3 has the highest amount of daylight. Now that's a tough balance to meet, right? But knowing that information is the only way to strike that balance. If the team hadn't known and they were just picking options willy-nilly, which I might say, like having been a consultant, I have seen that being done. And it's okay to choose options based on aesthetics. It's okay to choose options based on programmatic elements. It's okay to prioritize master plan, but we need to know exactly what we're choosing. We need to know what we're giving up. Which ahead with option 3, it used more energy, but they knew that in the schematic design layer. They knew that okay, we need to spend all of design development to bring it back down. And that's exactly what they did in design development with cost versus energy optimization. So they went ahead and created 3 different roof section options, right? Each with a different pricing point. Did the same for glazing. Did the same for different mechanical system types that were censoring points. I know that it only looks like 19 technology options, but if you look at every option with every option, that's 864 possible combinations. That's far too many options for any team to study manually, which is exactly why they use the power of automation. Now, each vertical axis here is one decision point, right? So daylight sensors, either we have them or we don't have them, right? Glazing products that they were looking at. Lighting types, if we do CFLs or LEDs. Roof, which section are we going with? Set points, do we adjust them or do we just keep whatever the university standard is? System type, which mechanical system do we actually go with? And they were able to balance that for energy, for cost, right? Money spent up front, and for energy savings. And they started creating bundles, right? They looked at, okay, if our EUI target is 75, what are all the different ways that we can get to that EUI target? And then let's pick the absolute lowest cost way to do so, because why wouldn't we? If our EUI target is 65, I mean, the lowest, the cheapest range is about 8 million and the most expensive range is about $9 million. I don't know any owner that would want us to choose poorly what the cost of a bad decision would have been. The absolute lowest cost way to do so. Same for the EUI 55. They were able to then take these options and be able to present them and also be able to figure out a few patterns and a few things that were common. For example, no matter the EUI target for this project work, for this project, for this program, for this occupancy schedule, daylight sensors didn't make sense. For this project, the glass type of SN68-2 was target of 75, but not for target of 65 and 55. They needed to upgrade their glass type. They also needed to upgrade their wall type as their EUI target became more stringent. No matter the EUI target, it never made sense for them to spend more money than code minimum on the roof. It definitely made sense. But no matter the EUI target, it was always, it didn't matter. It just didn't matter what the team went for. They just had
Sandeep,
to pick this particular one.
We are having a little bit of trouble hearing you. It's intermittent, but it's frequent. Maybe you can refresh your audio.
Yeah,
our apologies. Yeah, we all the
no worries at all.
Yeah, thank you very much
for letting me know. Of course, I just did hit refresh. Can you hear me?
Not very well.
Or is it still kind of intermittent?
It's quite intermittent. It was very actually up until now it was very infrequent, but now it's pretty much every, I don't know, 30 seconds or so.
Okay, I do apologize. Thank you for letting me
so one of our
take about 30 seconds.
Yeah, one of our Sandeep, excuse me, one of our participants is suggesting that you call in. If we can ask everybody to indulge us a minute or two, and why don't you call in on one of the audio only lines, and that may get you a better connection. We won't be able to see you, but I think it might be in improvement. Do you want to try that? Just yeah.
In the meantime, everyone, feel free to please put any questions that you might have for Sandeep in the Q&A function so that she can get to those at the end of the presentation.
Yes, and thanks everyone for your patience.
Hey, this is me calling in from the phone. Hopefully this is working a little bit better.
Oh yes,
that sounds great.
It's much better, and just a footnote, you probably know this since you have such excellent tech skills, but sometimes when you have your phone near your computer and your computer connection is live, you get an echo. So if we hear the echo, we'll tell you, and then I would just disconnect online and just stay on your phone. Yes, please proceed. Thank you.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you all for humoring me while I figured this out, but I think we have it squared away. Fantastic. So the key thing, it sounds like it's been fairly intermittent for the last few minutes, which is all about the cost optimization, was that they were really able to figure out the patterns on what worked versus what didn't work, and be able to really present those to the entire ownership team to actually make good data-driven decisions. And because they use cost optimization, they were actually able to pursue the EUI target of 55, which was actually more stringent than what they had set at the schematic design phase. And I think that was a pretty exciting takeaway, and they were only able to do that because they ran the cost optimization. And here's how they budgeted their time. For something that would have traditionally taken them about 35 hours of consulting hours, it only took them 3 hours. Across all of the different phases of design, they spent about 10 hours or $1,500, what would have once taken 235 hours or at least $35,000. Now, while $35,000 is not possible for every scope of project, imagine a small renovation project, maybe $35,000 doesn't make sense. But 10 hours, of a team person's time, that absolutely makes sense. And that is exactly what this team was able to observe as they implemented this across their entire project scope for all the many different project types. Here's a quick look at being able to do that in real time, because I think there's something to it to be able to tie back the actual analysis and how it was utilized in the case study to being able to see it visually and what it feels like in real time. So of course they did, all of these studies to be able to have good findings. They moved right along to energy analysis, and they were able to create their automatic report, which again, it's immensely helpful. And the whole point of creating the report, I remember having charged in my previous life $10,000 to $15,000 for a report like this. And I knew that not every project could afford that. And the whole goal of this report is to democratize access to data to be able to make sure that everyone can use it and have as many of these for as many projects as they're working on, with, of course, walk score, transit score, bike score, the actual energy analysis, all of the benchmarking pulled together, having all of the energy analysis pulled together, and the water use information all pulled together in a nice, easy to use PDF analysis. The report also highlighted all of the climate analysis and the passive strategies and water use. Water is a really, really big constraint when it comes to quite a few projects. So being really able to study the number of lead points, the actual indoor water use, how much does it affect if we have some low flow fixtures? How much does it affect if we have some gray water versus no gray water strategies? How much does it affect if I use sprinklers versus drip irrigation? Does it matter if I have turf versus native plants? What does that do to my overall irrigation and water requirements? To really tighten that collaboration between the architect and the landscape designer, between the architect and the irrigation consultant, also between the site and civil consultants. What does it take to manage stormwater on site? How much am I managing? Well, 10%, but if I have perhaps some semi-pervious area, what does that mean? What does that mean if I have 50,000 square foot of semi-pervious area? Well, I can now manage about 40% on site to really be able to have those conversations early on in the project. So it's not an afterthought. It's not separate from the design. It's a holistic part of the discussion that was extremely helpful for this particular project as well. And of course, we already touched on the climate analysis, but here is the optimization, where of course we have all of the vertical axes, each being a decision and each point within it being one product type, right? For glazing, I have all of these Viracon and solar band products. For wall, I have all of these different assemblies. And being able to balance that, I mean, in this case, they were even studying the support structure. Should it be mass timber or should it be steel? Because that has a big impact on the overall embodied carbon, which is also directly tied in with the open source EC3 database into the app. So you can see how much embodied carbon you have, what the cost is, what the payback is. So for example, if I was working on a project and the owner told me that, let's not even look at options that are more than 2 years of payback or 3 years of payback. Well, I can simply use a slider and only look at options that meet that. And within that, if I had to find something that was low carbon and low cost for the highest amount of energy savings, boom, here's my answer. I spend $15,000, get to a 25% energy savings, get to low embodied carbon, and I can see exactly what it took for me to get there. And I can study as many alternatives as I like based on the situation that I'm in. If a product type is no longer being considered, I can simply go in and take them out. If a project category is no longer being considered, perhaps we already figured out what our skylight assembly was going to be. I just remove all the options and just, go ahead and study the ones that are currently on the project and just hit recalculate, and it just keeps rerunning the project to find me the most cost optimal options for the actual design. Well, that's everything that I had for you all today. I wanted to make sure that I left at least 10 minutes for Q&A so I can answer some of your questions. And again, apologies for the technology concerns. Hopefully y'all can hear me loud and clear now.
We can. Thank you. That was great. So we have a few questions. I'll just read them starting from the top. We answered one everything came into the chat, but we just confirmed that AIA staff will be providing the free app process in the follow-up email. So that was the first one. The second one was, is it possible to use cove.tool per project, or is it a subscription?
It is definitely possible to use cove.tool per project. It is a yearly subscription, but most, in fact, everyone pays, like the return on investment is so high that you pay it off in like even your trial. Like you pay it back in less than one project because of the sheer number of hours saved versus not.
Well, that's interesting. And when we provide, will we provide the information about the free link? Will that include the menu of options and costs for potential subscribers?
That is exactly right. So teams will actually be able to get their access directly to the cove.tool platform by going onto the main site and just hitting get access, which will connect them to a team member that will best understand their needs, but we'll be able to make sure that because they're coming in and have attended this AIA California session, that they get 4 weeks of free access, which just doesn't happen typically. So if they hit this get access now, they'll be connected to a team that'll set them up. And as long as they refer this AIA California session, that everyone on the team has been made aware to be able to honor the 4 weeks of free access.
Thank you for that. We have a question. Are the pricing values updated real time with the market?
The pricing values are not updated real time. We use industry standard databases like RSMeans, and we add tons of intelligence into it based on actual project data. However, we are not cost estimators, but we do have integrated features. So if you do have a cost estimator on a project, you can invite them. You can go ahead and hit manage team and invite not just your cost estimator, but all of the different team collaborators, internal or external, that you're working with to be able to utilize the platform. For example, a cost estimator can have free access to come in and simply update the cost data. So the values are as good as they get based on databases, but as we all know, sometimes we need cost estimators for projects, so we've made it free for them to be able to add that value to your project.
Interesting. A related question, how is cove.tool priced?
Definitely. So cove.tool has a firm belief, because I started the company with the vision of making sure that every project globally could have a performance model, is why I started it. Also knew that one size does not fit all. So cove.tool is priced based on your particular needs. If you're doing few projects per year versus if you're doing many projects a year, if you have hundreds of designers versus if you have maybe one designer or sole proprietor. So it's priced based on your firm's needs. And as you go directly from the website, the team will be able to assist you to understand exactly how you intend to use it and find a plan that best fits your needs.
That's interesting. They're interesting questions. I'm going to venture to say that AIA California, in serving our members and serving our other strategic goals, we're looking for opportunities should a critical mass of members need a tool and it's individually inaccessible or too expensive. Are there ways for us to provide that for our members as a member benefit? So that's feedback that we'd like to get. Here's another question. I only need to use Cove for lead, for daylighting and view. Is it worth the cost?
Absolutely. I did lead views and daylight. If you look at just pure lead views and daylight, and you can actually find that, right? So let's do a quick cost comparison, because we run tons of these studies. I mean, I run a business, so comparing cost is extremely critical for me. So if you look at just the lead point of views, right? So here's all of there's tons of lead documentations. Let's look at some. So doing just your lead daylight calculation will easily take you a good about 45 to 60 on a simple project, and about 100 to 150 on a more complex project in terms of hours. I'll let you all do the math on how you pay your internal teams or external teams, whoever is doing it. And view analysis, there's literally no other way to do it unless you're a Grasshopper wizard, and then it will take you about 60 hours. But if you're not a Grasshopper wizard or a Radiance wizard, you can't do it in-house. So yeah, it's definitely worth it. And even if you are a wizard on both of those, you know that it takes that long to do it, because that's how long it took me to do it.
Interesting. The next question, I think you just answered it. What is the usage for lead submissions? I'm guessing there are multiple ways to use it in preparing a lead submission, and you've just shared one example. Is that right?
Absolutely. So what we're looking at is actually how to log your lead credits, and there's different types of USGBC lead documentations that you can do within the platform. Here's all of the different points that you can log for utilizing cove.tool, and there's additional documentation that is available for each of these points separately, which walks you through step by step. For example, here's just the quality views documentation. There's documentation for integrative process. So there's tons of documentation available on the Help Center on how you can get many different lead points.
And this is my question. And your Help Center, when the participants sign up for the free trial, will they be able to access as a trial member your Help Center, so they can look
They
at?
absolutely will. They absolutely will. The goal here is education. I don't believe that we can drive change. Like, I can't fight climate change alone. I could only do 200 projects as a consultant. And while that was a lucrative business for me personally, it wasn't lucrative for the world. We needed to make a bigger impact. We needed to be able to have everyone be able to do this, to be able to offset the sheer amount of carbon that we need to. Just this year, we've offset 27.6 million tons of CO2e. And to put it in perspective, that's 5x of Tesla. So we're driven by change. So absolutely, Help Center is available to everyone that signs up for a free trial.
And those logos at the top of your page, are those customers?
Yeah, we have thousands of customers. These are just some of them. There's thousands and thousands of customers, really. Here's a few more logos if we all like logos.
Well, I was just curious because, of course, there are different ways projects are delivered, right? Projects are delivered with upfront design using traditional delivery methods, with full architectural documents in a model like what you've explained, but many projects are led by a general contractor, in which case, if M.A. Mortensen and Beck were up there, that means some of your general contractor partners might be, are utilizing the tool, which through the subcontracts as the architect of record, an architect, for example, on a design build project would have access to use that perhaps through their prime contractor. Right?
It is actually both, but predominantly it is driven by architects. For example, in the example of someone like a Beck, of course, they have a design build team. But if you look at some of the other contractors like Skanska, for example, they're utilizing it not necessarily to run all of the analysis, because sure, they'll care about the materiality because it impacts the embodied carbon, but the know-how of how to impact the design in terms of daylighting or views or glare, all of that know-how and how to affect it to massing, I'm hopeful that still stays on the architect's court.
Very interesting. Very good presentation. We've had very good attendance, and we thank everyone for coming, for your questions, and for your patience on the audio. Thank you so much, Sandeep Ahuja. I thank you, Bill Burke, who's here with us. My colleague, our colleague, and a member of our Committee on the Environment of AIA California. Just a reminder, if you made it this far, you will get your CE credits. We will be publishing up the tools. You'll get your free link to sign up as a complimentary trial member of cove.tool through a direct email. And more details on the final webinars in our 2021 series will be sent. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. Best wishes this season, and we look forward to future events together.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rona. I appreciate you.
You're most welcome.